O.G. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about a short work called The Meaning Crisis as a Sign of Hope. The meaning crisis is a phrase coined by John Vervaeke, which is talking about how today we have this pressing problem of feeling like our life doesn't have direction. We are existentially destabilized. It's hard for us to find meaning, and so on. This idea is discussed throughout O.G. Rose, such as in the paper Explained and Addressed, or throughout the book Belonging Again. And it is a very difficult situation. It's arguably dire. It's very difficult for us to know how to organize our lives, and when we're so destabilized, totalitarianism is appealing. Mental illness gets worse. We can struggle to know what to do with ourselves. So it's a really difficult problem. But I think it might be useful if we perhaps frame the meaning crisis in a new way. I think usually when we think about the meaning crisis, we think about it as this dead end that we found ourselves in. We were going through history and we took a wrong turn, and now we've ended up somewhere where we don't know what to do with ourselves, and we have a meaning crisis and we feel kind of doomed. So we feel like we're in a locked room and we don't have the key to get out. But I think it's important to realize that the meaning crisis, in a respect, is self-imposed. It's something we're doing to ourselves because we now hold ourselves to higher standards. It's because we don't really settle for old solutions to the meaning crisis. What I mean by that is that every civilization has had to deal with the problem of meaning in the same way that they've had to deal with food, water, shelter, reproduction, and so on. Well, meaning has been a constant problem. It's not just today that we're having to deal with meaning. Every civilization has. It's just today that we don't have a solution for how to find meaning in a manner that doesn't fall back on old ways of dealing with meaning. So this is really important, because if we think of the meaning crisis this way, as if it's something that we've chosen because we now hold ourselves up to higher standards, well, then there's actually something noble about the meaning crisis. There's actually something honorable about it. It's something that we are suffering because we will not lower our standards. And what do I mean by this? What I mean is that we actually do, in fact, know solutions to the meaning crisis. We do, in fact, know how to address it. Here's a list of some. Nationalism, fundamentalism, racism, bigotry, thoughtlessness, isolationism, closed-mindedness, war, violence. And I could go on. All of those are ways you deal with the meaning crisis. People find meaning when they fall into nationalism. People find meaning when they fall into closed-minded fundamentalism, where they just see the world in terms of black and white. People find meaning in racism, where they're the special race and all the other races are not special, and they find meaning in that. They find meaning in bigotry, in all us and them dynamics. Isolationism, where you separate yourself from the world and view yourself as better at that than the rest of the world, or you isolate yourself so that you don't have to deal with the world and can just think about what you want to think about. You save yourself from existential anxiety that way, and people find meaning in war. Those are all ways to deal with the meaning crisis, and we could do them right now. And in fact, some people are doing them right now, and that's part of the problem. We view people solving the meaning crisis with one of those old, outdated options as problematic. But they do, in fact, solve the meaning crisis, and they are how civilizations in the past dealt with the meaning crisis. We could use these options, but we are choosing not to. The meaning crisis is noble in that sense. It's a sign of us refusing to bend our standards, that we are holding ourselves to a higher standards. It's the very existence of the meaning crisis is a testament to our unwillingness to compromise on what we believe is right. And so we need to stop thinking of it as a prison cell with no key. It's more like we're in a prison that we could escape whenever we wanted. But instead, for our principles and morals, we refuse the invitation of our captor, of our prison guard, if you will. We simply won't accept his terms, because he would have us become racist, or say fall into conspiratorial thinking, or fall into fundamentalism, or so on and so forth, or to deny pluralism and all the existential difficulty that the shattering of givens brings about because of pluralism. So there is something noble. The people like Thomas More, for example, who's the play A Man of All Seasons. He's the Catholic saint, I believe. He refused to give King Henry a divorce. He refused to acknowledge the divorce, and How easily could he have just simply given King Henry what he wanted? But Thomas More refused, and as a result, he was executed. He stood up for what he believed. Whether we think he did what was wise, that's a different question. But there is, in fact, something noble about a Thomas More, because he didn't bend his principles. He stood up for what he believed. We need to start seeing the meaning crisis as something like that, where we're kind of like Thomas More, and we're sticking to our principles, our convictions, our morals, and we refuse to compromise. And for that, we are suffering, just like Thomas More suffered. For that, we are going through hardship. But there's something noble about that hardship, and I think it's important to see nobility in it, because then it's easier to have hope in it, to not lose hope in the middle of the meaning crisis. But because if you see it as something that we are choosing to submit ourselves to for the sake of moral standards, then it's something that actually suggests a hope in it. It actually is something about it that suggests something good. And I think it's easier to see through it. Now, we still need to find a new way to get meaning in our lives, to feel like we have meaning that doesn't fall back on an old immoral solution. So the problem of the quote-unquote meaning crisis is still very real, and we still have work to do. And that gets into books like Belonging Again, I mentioned, Explained and Addressed, these new examinations of Hegel that Cadell and different that we're all doing. There is still work to be done, but the likelihood of, I think, us holding out and sustaining that work until we find the right solution is much less if we think of the meaning crisis as a room that we're locked in and can't get out. But if we think instead of the meaning crisis as resulting from standing up for what's right, well, then that's going to give us hope to see it through. The suffering of the meaning crisis then becomes not something that we're going through because we stupidly stumbled into a problem that we can't get out of. No, the suffering becomes self-imposed, and there's a nobility in that. And in fact, if we see a kind of nobility in this act of suffering the meaning crisis for higher principles, well, there's a kind of meaning you can get from that very act of suffering the meaning crisis. There's something about that says that human beings can, in fact, stand up for what is right, for what they believe is right, even if it costs them something. And that says something about what human beings can do. And the very fact that human beings can do that and are willing to do that, I think does suggest that there's some meaning in life, and that life can, in fact, have meaning. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com, and thank you for your time.